The black doctor denied entry to emergency room and then saves a hospital CEO. Welcome to the No Justice Nation channel, where you will get true stories of affairs and awareness. It was a stormy Monday morning. Rain lashed down against the windows of St. Gregory Medical Center in Boston. Inside, the ER was already chaotic. Sirens screamed in the distance. Nurses rushed between beds. The trauma unit was prepped for a high-profile emergency case. Word was, someone from the hospital board had collapsed during a charity event, but just outside the ER entrance, a different kind of emergency was unfolding. Dr. Elijah Brooks had just parked his black Lexus in the physician's parking zone. He was wearing a charcoal gray suit and carried his briefcase in one hand, his ID badge not yet visible. He had been called in on his day off because the patient coming in needed the best. And Elijah was the best. As he approached the ER doors, 2 hospital security guards moved quickly to intercept him. "Sir, you can't come through here," one barked, blocking his path. Dr. Brooks paused. "I'm Dr. Brooks. I was called in for an emergency surgery." The second guard narrowed his eyes. "Nice try. Delivery entrance is out back." "I'm not here for delivery," Elijah said calmly, reaching into his jacket for his badge. "Keep your hand where I can see him." The first guard snapped. For a moment, Elijah froze. His heart raced, not from fear, but from the painful familiarity of the moment. He knew this scene. He'd lived it before. Not here, not this blatant, but this wasn't new. "I'm a trauma surgeon," he repeated. "I work here. Look." Before he could pull out his ID, the first guard radioed in. "We got an individual refusing to comply at ER entrance, possibly impersonating staff." Impersonating staff. Elijah's jaw clenched. Minutes passed. A crowd started to gather. Nurses looked on. A paramedic walked by and did a double take. One young resident, who knew Dr. Brooks, shouted, "Hey, that's Dr. Brooks. What the hell are y'all doing?" But the guards weren't listening. When the hospital's head of security, a white man named Peter Hanley, arrived, he didn't ask questions. He walked up to Elijah, already making assumptions. "We've had a lot of issues with fake IDs and intruders," Hanley said coldly. "You understand?" "No," Elijah replied, voice steady. "I don't understand. You know me, Peter. You've seen me in this hospital. This isn't about policy. It's about prejudice." Hanley didn't respond. He just stepped aside and waved his hand. "Let's go. You're free to enter now." No apology, no acknowledgement, just dismissal. Elijah walked through the doors with his head held high, but inside, he was burning. He changed into his scrubs in silence. His mind should have been on the surgery ahead, but instead, it was replaying every second of the confrontation. The patient was wheeled in minutes later, and when Elijah saw the face on the gurney, everything stopped. It was William Denham, the CEO of the hospital, the same man who had praised Elijah in public speeches, the same man who smiled at him during board meetings and now lay unconscious on the table with a ruptured aorta. The irony was deafening, but Elijah didn't flinch. He scrubbed in, focused like a laser, and performed procedures so delicate that only 3 other surgeons in the state had ever done it successfully. 6 hours later, William Denham was stable, alive. When Denham came to the next day, his wife and the hospital board surrounded his bed. They told him about the surgery, about how Dr. Brooks had saved his life. Denham asked to see him. When Elijah walked into the room, Denham looked up with glassy eyes. "I heard you weren't let in," he said softly. "That's correct," Elijah replied, his voice cool. Denham paused. "I'm sorry." Elijah shook his head. "That's not enough." There was silence in the room. "You built a system that sees me as a threat before it sees me as a healer," Elijah continued. "You hire people who treat me like a criminal before they treat me like a colleague. That's not an accident. That's culture." The board members shifted uncomfortably. Elijah looked directly at Denham. "I saved your life. But this hospital needs saving too." Word traveled fast. What began as whispers among hospital staff quickly turned into a city-wide conversation. One nurse, appalled by what she had witnessed, anonymously tipped off a local news station. Soon, the headline was everywhere. Black trauma surgeon denied entry to his own hospital, then saves the life of its CEO. It went viral. Local activists picked it up. Twitter exploded. Hashtags began trending. Hashtag let doctors in. Hashtag Dr. Brooks deserve better. Hashtag medicine is not colorblind. The hospital's PR team scrambled. Statements were drafted. Damage control kicked in. But it was too late. Reporters camped outside St. Gregory Medical Center. Protesters began showing up with signs. One, held by a young black med student, read, "If Dr. Brooks isn't safe in scrubs, who is?" Hospital executives scheduled a press conference. But everyone was waiting to hear from one person, Dr. Elijah Brooks. And when he finally stepped up to the mic, he didn't hold back. The conference room was packed. Journalist cameras, microphones, flashing lights. Elijah stood calmly behind the podium, wearing his scrubs. No suit, no white coat, just the uniform that had been ignored. "I'm here today not because I want attention," he began, voice steady. "I'm here because I was stopped from entering my own place of work. Not because I did anything wrong, but because I fit someone's idea of what danger looks like." A hush fell over the room. He continued, "I performed over 600 life-saving surgeries. I've led trauma teams in war zones. I've trained the next generation of surgeons. But none of that mattered when I walked up to that ER entrance. All they saw was a black man." His words cut deep. "This isn't about one bad security guard. This is about a system, a culture, a pattern. We can't keep pretending the medical field is immune from the same biases we see in the streets." One journalist raised a hand. "Dr. Brooks, will you be suing the hospital?" Elijah paused. "I haven't decided that yet, but I will be holding people accountable." Not everyone applauded. Behind closed doors, some on the hospital board were furious. They didn't appreciate the bad press. Some accused Elijah of making it about race. Others whispered that he was overreacting, but patients, staff, and the wider community stood behind him. A young Latina nurse posted a TikTok tearfully describing how Elijah had once held her hand after a tough shift. "He's more than a surgeon," she said. "He's the heart of this place." The video hit 1 million views in a day. Meanwhile, Elijah was flooded with messages from other black doctors across the country. "I was once locked out of an OR until I proved I wasn't janitor. My patient refused treatment because they didn't believe I was a real doctor. Thank you for speaking out. We all needed this." It was bigger than one hospital now. 2 weeks after the incident, CEO William Denham called a second press conference. He walked to the podium slowly, still recovering physically and emotionally. He began, "I owe my life to Dr. Brooks, and I owe him and this city an apology." The room was silent. What happened to him was unacceptable. What's more unacceptable is that it didn't surprise him, or many others. That's the real tragedy. Denham went on to announce a full-scale internal review, mandatory bias training for all staff, new protocols for hospital security. But most importantly, he announced his resignation. "I can't lead a hospital built on healing while ignoring the harm that's been done under my leadership," he said. "Effective immediately, I am stepping down as CEO." Gasps rippled through the room. Denham turned to Elijah, who was sitting in the front row. "I hope you'll stay," he said. "This hospital needs you." Elijah didn't smile. He just nodded. Later that week, Elijah sat down for an in-depth interview with a national news anchor. "What was going through your mind when they stopped you?" the anchor asked. Elijah looked down for a moment, then back up. "I thought about my father," he said. "He worked 3 jobs so I could go to medical school. He used to tell me, 'You're going to have to be twice as good to get half the respect.' I didn't believe him. Not really. Not until that day." He paused. "I thought we'd move further than this. I thought my credentials would speak louder than my skin. But I was wrong." The anchor leaned forward. "What's next for you?" "I'll keep saving lives," he said. "And I'll keep speaking up. Because if I don't, who will?" 3 months later, St. Gregory Medical Center had a new interim CEO. And Dr. Elijah Brooks? He was promoted to Chief of Trauma Surgery. But he didn't stop there. He partnered with local universities to launch a scholarship fund for Black and brown med students. He created an advocacy group called Scrubs of Color, aimed at fighting racial bias in healthcare systems across America. He spoke at Harvard Medical School, Johns Hopkins, and Stanford. And every time he told a story, he ended it with the same line. They tried to keep me out. Now I'm holding the door open for others. Like my video and subscribe my channel for more daily videos. Long before Elijah Brooks became a renowned trauma surgeon, he was just a boy growing up on the south side of Chicago. His mother was a public school teacher. His father a mechanic. Money was tight, but the love in their home ran deep. From an early age, Elijah was fascinated by the human body, while other kids played video games. He flipped through borrowed anatomy books from the local library. But it wasn't easy. At just 13, he was stopped and frisked by police while walking home from school. At 15, a teacher accused him of plagiarizing a biology paper because she didn't believe someone like him could write at that level. These experiences left marks, but they also lit a fire. He promised himself he'd prove them all wrong. And he did. He graduated high school with honors, earned a full scholarship to Howard University, and later attended Johns Hopkins for med school. But even with all that success, the same suspicion still followed him. Too articulate, too confident, too well-dressed to be a real doctor. These weren't compliments. They were coded warnings, constant reminders that, in the eyes of many, he didn't fit the mold. So when those guards stopped him at the ER door, it wasn't just about that day. It was about every day before it. Part 12, The Med Student. 1 week after Elijah's story went viral, a young Black med student named Amar Johnson reached out via email. Her message read, "Dr. Brooks, I saw what happened to you, and I cried, because it could have been me. I'm in my 3rd year at Harvard Med. I've been mistaken for everything, orderly, assistant, even janitor, but never a future doctor. Thank you for standing up. I won't be like you." Elijah replied the same day, "Amara, you already are like me, and one day you'll be better. Let's talk." He invited her to shadow him at St. Gregory. Amara showed up nervous, clutching her notepad and stethoscope like armor, but Elijah welcomed her with a warm smile. "Here," he said, handing her a clean lab coat with her name stitched on it. "No one's going to question you today." That day, they performed a 4-hour abdominal surgery together. She held the clamp. He guided her hands. When it was over, she looked at him with awe. "You didn't just save that patient," she said. "You saved me, too." Behind the scenes, St. Gregory was feeling the heat. State regulators launched a probe. Donors threatened to pull funding. Former employees began sharing their own horror stories. How Black nurses were overlooked for promotions. How complaints about racism were buried. The hospital's board scrambled. To save face, they brought in a diversity consultant and promised sweeping changes. But Elijah wasn't satisfied with lip service. In a private meeting with the board, he made a bold move. "I want a seat here," he said. One board member scoffed. "You're asking to join the board of directors?" "No," Elijah replied. "I'm demanding it." The room fell silent. He continued, "You need someone here who understands what happens on the ground. Someone who's lived it. You've had your turn. Now it's mine." After days of backroom debate and massive public pressure, Elijah got a seat. He was now the first Black physician to ever sit on St. Gregory's board of directors. With his new position, Elijah began pushing for real change. Security training was revamped from top to bottom. Hiring practices were audited and overhauled. A confidential hotline was created so staff could report discrimination without retaliation. And perhaps most significantly, he instituted a Walk in My Shoes initiative, a program where executives shadowed medical staff of different races, genders, and roles to understand what they endured daily. Some scoffed, some quit, but many learned. One white nurse who once questioned Elijah's authority now became one of his strongest allies. "Dr. Brooks," she said one day, "I never knew how different our worlds were, even inside the same building." He smiled sadly. "Now you do." Late one night, Elijah received a frantic call from his sister, Nadia. Her son, his nephew, had been arrested for jogging in the wrong neighborhood. Elijah dropped everything and drove to the local precinct. He was calm, professional, but seething inside. He found his 17-year-old nephew handcuffed to a bench, eyes red from crying. The officer, seeing Elijah in scrubs, said smugly, "Didn't know you were a doctor. We thought." Elijah cut him off. "You thought what?" The officer swallowed his words. Elijah turned to his nephew. "Come on, son. Let's go." As they left the station, his nephew whispered, "I thought being good at school would protect me. Like you." Elijah stopped walking. He turned to his nephew, put a hand on his shoulder, and said, "Being good doesn't protect you, but standing up does." That moment haunted him for days, because saving lives wasn't enough. He had to change the world those lives existed in. 6 months after the incident, St. Gregory looked different. More diverse staff, better morale, new protocols, and a new mural in the main hallway, a portrait of Dr. Elijah Brooks in scrubs standing beneath the quote, "They tried to keep me out. Now I'm holding the door open for others." Patients stopped to stare. Kids took selfies in front of it. Elijah, ever humble, tried to avoid the spotlight. But deep down he knew this wasn't just a story anymore. It was a movement. 1 year after the incident, Dr. Elijah Brooks was invited to speak at the National Medical Ethics Conference in Washington, D.C. It wasn't just any slot. He was the keynote speaker. The room was packed with physicians, administrators, med students, and policymakers. The atmosphere was electric. Cameras lined the walls. News outlets were streaming live. Elijah stepped to the podium with calm conviction. He looked over the audience, paused, and began. "They say the Hippocratic Oath binds us to do no harm. But what happens when harm isn't just physical? What happens when bias, subtle or blatant, cuts deep in the scalpel? I was denied entry to my own hospital, not because I forgot my ID, not because I wasn't qualified, but because I was black in scrubs." Gasps. Heads nodded. He told them about the guards, about saving the CO, about the protest, about Amara, about the night at the police station. Then he looked dead into the camera. Racism is not just a public health issue. It is a medical emergency. The room erupted in applause. After the speech, doctors from around the world approached him. India, the UK, Nigeria, Brazil, all echoing similar experiences in their own systems. That day, Elijah didn't just speak. He ignited a movement. Despite all the positive change, there were still wounds left unhealed. Elijah filed a formal civil rights lawsuit against the hospital's private security firm. It wasn't about money. It was about accountability. During the deposition, the 2 guards who had blocked him at the ER door were grilled by attorneys. One admitted under oath. He looked out of place. "I just didn't think a surgeon would be, you know." "You know," the lawyer repeated. The guard shifted uncomfortably. "Black." That moment sealed the case. The firm settled for $2.3 million and was removed from all hospital contracts statewide. But Elijah didn't keep the money. He donated every penny to fund diversity scholarships for future medical students of color. He renamed the fund after his late father, the Harold Brooks Initiative for Justice in Medicine. One quiet evening at the hospital, as Elijah prepared for rounds, someone knocked on his office door. It was William Denham, the former CEO. He looked older now, slower, but his eyes still burned with regret and respect. "I've been following your journey," William said. "You're changing the game." Elijah nodded, trying to. William hesitated. "I came to thank you again, and to apologize for all of it." Elijah studied him for a moment, then motioned for him to sit. They talked for nearly 2 hours. About legacy, about blindness, about how power often shields itself from truth. William wiped a tear from his cheek. "I should have seen it," he whispered. "I was a leader, and I was blind." "You weren't blind," Elijah corrected. "You just didn't look." It was a hard truth, but William accepted it. Before leaving, he handed Elijah a leather-bound book, The Souls of Black Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois. This changed me, William said. Elijah nodded. Now let's change more. Part 20, Amar's graduation. 2 years later, Amara Johnson graduated from Harvard Medical School, top of her class. She delivered the valedictory address, the first black woman in the school's 200-year history to do so. In the front row sat her mother, her younger siblings, and Dr. Elijah Brooks. As she took the stage, she locked eyes with him. I am here today because someone held the door open for me when others tried to slam it shut. I dedicate this degree to Dr. Elijah Brooks, surgeon, mentor, fighter, and friend. Your courage paved the road I now walk on. The crowd rose to its feet. Elijah's eyes filled with tears. He stood and clapped, proud beyond words. Back in Chicago, Elijah's impact rippled far beyond the hospital. His advocacy group, Scrubs of Color, had grown into a nationwide network of over 5,000 healthcare workers. They held conferences, published reports, even lobbied Congress for systemic reforms in hospital staffing, racial equity, and bias education. Elijah also launched a podcast, White Coats, Black Truths, where he interviewed professionals who'd faced racial discrimination in medicine and how they overcame it. It became a top-ranked show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. His name appeared in Time magazine's 100 Most Influential People in Health, but he remained grounded, still doing surgeries, still walking hospital halls, still mentoring, still healing. Late one evening, as Elijah was leaving the hospital, a young janitor approached him. "Excuse me, Dr. Brooks?" Elijah turned. The janitor looked nervous but determined. "I've seen what you've done here. I just wanted you to know I enrolled in community college last fall, pre-med." Elijah smiled. "That's incredible. How can I help?" "I'm not sure yet," the young man said, "but just seeing you here every day, that's helping more than you know." Elijah nodded slowly. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a worn name badge, the same one he'd tried to show the guards that fateful night. He handed it to the janitor. "Hold on to this," Elijah said, "and when you get your white coat, pass it to someone else." The janitor's eyes brimmed with tears. "I will." And so the story comes full circle. What began with 2 guards and a locked door became a national reckoning. Dr. Elijah Brooks didn't just save a life. He saved a hospital. He built a path. He created a legacy. They tried to stop him with ignorance. They tried to define him by his skin. But he defined himself by his work, his compassion, his strength. This is not just a story about medicine. It's about the heart behind the hands, the soul behind the stethoscope, the fight behind the white coat. This is No Justice Nation, and we're telling the stories they want buried. Like my video and subscribe my channel for more daily videos.